Hey everyone, welcome to Founders 365 with me, Stephen Haggerty. Today, I'm joined by another fabulous Steve Round, founder of I'm going to say it wrong, Steve. SaaScada.
SaaScada. That's the one. Thank you, Steve.
How are you today, Steve?
Very well, thank you, Stephen. Very well considering.
Good man. I'm glad. That's it. I think that's the word that everyone has to add on to everything now. It's considering. Yes. It's good. Right. Let's jump straight into this because my first question is always just like, tell me about you. Tell me about SaaScada, what you guys do. I know your tagline is all about sort of getting financial services to create a fairer society.
Yeah.
And I think when people think financial services, I don't think fair is probably the first word they think of.
I would totally agree. Hence
But
why we're trying to do
it.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. For anyone who's techie, SaaScada is a cloud-based banking platform provider. We actually build banking platforms, core banking systems around the world based in the cloud, low cost. Before anyone turns off, I've never written a line of code in my life. But what I realized was that technology can help access people who are disadvantaged. So therefore, I spent most of my working life trying to find solutions. I suppose disruptive financial services, before the word disruptive was pinched by the tech people, and to find ways that actually to develop first-class financial products for people on low income, people excluded, homeless around the world. And what I found was that technology was a really good enabler to do that. There's lots of great projects, UK, internationally, about financial inclusion. I have a problem with financial inclusion itself. It's, by definition, means we'll develop a product for you on a very low income, and actually you have it. I don't need it because I'm in the mainstream, and it can tend to ghettoize people if you're not careful. Yeah. What technology has enabled us to do is actually to create a first-class product available to as many people as possible, and as many who are either on low income or high income. And two examples I can give you of that was when I launched the Change account back in 2014, which was aimed at people on low income, homeless. In fact, our first 60 accounts were from a project in York where there were 60 homeless people in a shelter who were trying to move into the next stage of trying to get a job. And of course, you can't claim benefits if you don't have a bank account. And if you're homeless, try getting a bank account. So we created a system where they could, but the product itself was based on budgeting tools, everything you now see in a Monzo or a Revolut. So that's how we started on the technology there. Last week, we launched the first cloud-based banking platform in Switzerland, which is on a very different basis for the wallets that are not used for budgeting tools for rents and rates. They're used for foreign currency, and they're used for rafting. But the technology itself is exactly the same, and that's the key. If we want to change the world of finance, and I believe that finance does need changing and democratizing, for want of a better phrase, then we have to have the ability for organizations to set up banks relatively low cost. Still got to have restrictions in there, but actually our technology enables them to do that. That's what I'm desperate to do. Hence why we're very much involved in Africa. We're working with some credit unions now in the US as well as in the UK.
Exactly. Let's take it back a little bit then, because like we said, financial services, typically the word isn't the word fair isn't the first word you think of. But for you, what was it that made you just go, you know what, I'm going to make this a fairer society, and I'm going to lead the technology to help people implement that?
Well, I'd love to say there was a sort of switch that just turned on. It was something that in fact, yeah, some of my friends from a long time ago would say, where did you find this social conscience? And it was just, it's a serious point. I got very involved in community development finance, which is stolen from the States, which is very much about They brought in the States, and I think it was 1977, what was called a Community Reinvestment Act. Very exciting. And what that was about was that banks were actually, what they were doing, they were taking deposits from their local community and then lending it down the street. The problem is the local community, and not lending it to the local community. I know. We've never seen that in the UK, no. And ever.
It's brand new.
So they brought in the Community Reinvestment Act, and the CDFI I got very involved in the UK was doing exactly the opposite. We were taking funds from the locals and actually lending it back into projects, particularly in London, as it was at the time, in Newham specifically, where there was a lot of relatively old people in quite dilapidated houses. So they were cash poor, asset rich. So we found different ways of actually supporting how we could actually get them to renovate and keep it to a certain standard. So innovative products like that. We also got very involved at the first stage with a crazy entrepreneur who wanted to set up sparkling water and still water, and the profits go to Africa for building wells, and that was something that really no one wanted to do at the time. So we actually put in a substantial amount of money, and a guy called Gordon Roddick, the husband of Anita from the Body Shop, and we made that work for 2 years, and he went on and actually then borrowed money from real banks, and that became Bellew Water, and that's one of the most successful projects that I think London Rebuilding Society have done, but also it's now in most hotels and the House of Commons, and is generating an awful lot of profits for WaterAid across the world. So that's sort of how I start getting involved in all this, sort of trying to change to a fairer society. And at the same time, sort of came across, I was introduced to John Bird from The Big Issue, and he asked me if I would chair the Big Issue Foundation. And that sort of got me involved in access to, Big Issue at that time had about 3,000 vendors. And of course,
they must.
Sorry?
You know, how many vendors do they have now?
Well, it depends. It's quite an eclectic sales force.
Yeah.
And one of the problems is, at the moment, they've all been taken off the streets because the Big Issue have taken them off the streets.
I saw that. And they've now launched the digital version.
Yeah, and there's a number of outlets. I think Co-op, I think Sainsbury's are actually selling it in their stores as well, which is good.
You know, it's just to sort of sidetrack here, but that's something that we just we just completely forget about when we're being locked in our homes, not being able to do anything. You know, people that are selling Big Issues that you probably walk past multiple times a week.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think most people probably pay very little notice, which is a real shame. But it's now it's one of those things that I'm hoping is going to allow people to become more aware that actually, you know what, there are people outside your little bubble, and they need help. So it's really good that I'm so glad that I saw last week that Big Issue have put in those steps to
yeah, we try. I mean, the downside is, and in many ways, I mean, it's the hardest job in the world, let me tell you. Probably not at this moment with all the the great support staff from the NHS and all the other services, but yeah, to actually stand on a corner and actually sell the Big Issue, because they do sell it. I mean, it's a micro business. I mean, they buy the magazine and then sell it. And, you know, to do that, I mean, in many ways, it's just easier to beg, but it's about people trying to move themselves forward and take it's a hand up, not a hand out. But yeah, I mean, I think where the situation where we are now, you see a lot of really good attitudes of people supporting it. And as you say, actually taking time to look at what other people, I didn't realize I've got out of my bubble. And I do think this is giving people time to do that. I think I'm hoping that maintains and retains itself post.
Just see how, I don't know if the words quickly is the right word, but how things do go. What is the new normal after this is probably the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, I think, I now live in Staffordshire, and I've seen the high street in Stafford die. I mean, it's now dead. from where we are now. And I think that's going to take I'm not sure where all those are going to go back to. I then think that actually the reality is that we are going to take a period of time to even congregate together in any form of numbers.
Trust a handshake.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so I think that from a community perspective, it's going to be quite a while, I would have thought, before we are feeling normalized. But actually, I think what we've got to try and do is maintain all the community elements that we've got. But it'll be very easy to lose those in over a period of time. And I think the challenge will be, and one of my passions as well, of course, is I chair Ecology Building Society, which is we build a greener society. We've got the big issue of climate change as well, and how we address that. And what find interesting, as I'm sure we all did, was I think 6 weeks into China's debacle, the pollution levels dropped by about 70%.
Yeah, those satellite images were.
And I noticed in was it in India or not even in Nepal, where there are people who can actually see the Himalayas for the first time in their lives. So because of the lack of.
I mean, even in London, it's dropped by something like 60%.
I know. I mean, so I think those changes we have to try and retain.
Yeah.
I think from a financial certain where my drive will be, I do think that we're going to have, no matter what the governments are doing around the world, we're going to have massively increased unemployment. Therefore,
as a business owner, how are you setting yourself up for that then? How are you setting yourself up for the change that is inevitable?
No, it's a good point. Well, we were conscious of things were going to change, so we've worked with all our existing customers on managing our relationships, their relationships, what they can pay, what they can afford to pay. So, and I have to say, in the financial services supplier chain, let's not call it, not about the customers at the moment. So there's been a lot of work on people trying to work together to ensure that we all come out of this alive. And as a business, we spent an awful lot of time on that. And same with the staff. We moved out of our offices very quickly, and I have to say, I've heard some horror stories about some people trying to get out of offices. It cost us a little bit, but we had to get out. What we're planning for, and what's interesting, I suppose, the nature of our business is that because we build cloud-based banking platforms and we've been out pushing, we actually had a significant number of inquiries, particularly in the US, and actually 2 in the UK who want to actually start before the year end, who will be cloud-based, mobile, with cards if you need them. So it is for us, it's hunkering down short term, as we all are, and cash is king. And the horror stories again you hear about people applying for this for the loans and whatever. We're trying to stay away from that, with the view that our plan, I suppose, in our mind is that hopefully September, October, we will be back pushing again. If it carries on much longer than that, then I think we're all starting to worry a little bit. But from where we are now, from a perspective of business, our existing clients are still there. Brilliant. And our prospective new clients, I say, we've had a number of really interesting phone calls. We've been working on the US for a while, particularly in the credit union. I don't know if you know, the US banking system is a little bit more
behind from whenever I've experienced it, whenever I've gone to the States. The fact that I'm even just the basic stuff that you still sign for things, and PIN is like a new thing there. It blew my mind really, because I was obviously it was the first time I went to New York a couple of years ago, and I was expecting like the future, not
the past. I know. It's in some of the counties. I mean, I was in Charlotte, and it really is going back 20, 30 years. But it is. But this is actually going to transform a lot of their banking. So from a purely from a commercial perspective, we're reasonably confident.
Yeah, that's good.
I would say reasonably confident because you never know.
As well.
Sorry?
Change helps other people. So
yeah, no, absolutely right. And
more change is developed.
Yeah, and again, financial services and banking specifically, they don't innovate massively generally, and therefore, although we had been in discussions with many banks in the States for the last year and a bit, the desire to change wasn't really driven by a real desire to change. Now there is,
because in their eyes, it's not broken.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And because it's don't forget, it's quite a disparate banking system. I mean, there are very few national, like your city banks or whatever. Most banks are geographically very constrained and actually quite small. And therefore, they're very much like I suppose the building societies in the UK. I'm not counting nationwide in that because of the size, but actually, if you look at most,
Dave, what was his name? Dave,
Darwin, wasn't it? Or it was,
that's a great documentary.
But but you can. That's an impossible thing to replicate because he was funding the loans.
Yeah, he was just basically a legal loan shark.
Yeah, he was doing it really nicely, but
he was like the nicest bloke as well.
No, absolutely. I think what he was doing for the community was phenomenal. It was just something you couldn't replicate. Hence why the regulators did say you couldn't call it a bank because technically he wouldn't get his license to do it. But no, I mean, so, and I think that's the challenge that I also see in the UK. We have, I also chair a building society, Ecology, and Ecology was set up in 1981 by a number of Green Party members who wanted to build a greener society. Now, in 1981, that was a bit crazy. Well, it's not so crazy now. And at the time, I think there were 268 building societies in 1981.
Wow.
There are now 43. And
do you think the world will go back more into that though?
Okay. No, I think there's a mix. I think there's the if you take, I don't know when the last time you went to a bank or when you paid anything other than on your mobile. I can't remember.
The only bank I use is Starling and Monzo.
Yeah. So there you go then. So you've got two of the new entrants. And most of us don't use online at worst and mobile banking generally all the time. And that's set to increase dramatically. Interestingly, and I'm going to ask you a personal question then. So I'm interested. A lot of people, although they use Monzo, particularly in the southeast, don't have their salaries paid into Monzo. They use it more as a spending account rather than a depositing account.
So I used to use Monzo every single day for everything.
Yeah.
And then I switched to Starling because I got business bank with Starling.
Yeah, they're good.
Personal bank, and then we got a joint bank with me and my girlfriend.
Yeah.
So now, honestly, 95% of all my transactions are done through Starling.
Yeah, I mean, Anne Bolden, who I know well, as the chief exec of Starling, I think they built it properly. They smashed it. Yeah, no, I've got a great lot of respect for Starling. I mean, I think there are a number of new banks going to be set up and are being set up. I know because we're going to be providing some of the services to them. But of course, a lot of it will be in the SME sector, which is interesting. But of course, the reality around community banking in the States is that's going to be there for a while. New technology will help them.
Yeah.
Building societies in the UK are challenged. I mean, the average age of a first-time mortgagee now is 37, I think.
It's nuts.
And the average age of a saver is 55. And out of those 43 building societies left, I think I'm right in saying 35 of them, you can apply online for an account. Then you print it out, you sign it, and you send it in. I'm not sure I know anyone who's going to do that anyway.
I only brought a printer, I hadn't had a printer for so long, so I never needed.
But also they've got to be relevant to a younger audience. So I mean, yeah, most of them don't do mobile apps, and therefore I think, yeah, I think so. And I do think time is about to change for a lot of financial services providers in the UK. I think choice is good, and you mentioned two really good options, Starling and Monzo. Yeah, the reality is that we are probably way ahead of any other country.
Yeah, when
it comes to our mobile banking.
So on the flip side, then, is there a downside to that? Because like I said, I bank with Starling, had Monzo, but then I feel like I go on Facebook or Instagram, and every other ad seems to be for another bank that's similar to Starling or similar to Monzo. Surely there's a downside to that, because people are just going to flood that market, and it's going to not devalue in a sort of monetary sense, but in the almost novelty sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's three things on that. One is everyone likes choice. However, you still, the majority of people in the UK, even the people who actually use a Monzo or a new card or a mobile app, have their salaries paid into traditional banks.
Yeah,
because they feel safe and secure and whatever. I think where we're using the technology is that there's Eastern Europe, parts of Asia, but definitely parts of Africa can benefit from the skill sets, the knowledge, and the software that's been developed. And because if going back to my fairer society, if you want a fairer society internationally, the building great mobile apps and great banking apps in Africa is one thing. So what? If you've got no trust in the infrastructure, which a lot of people don't have, therefore it's immaterial, really. Certain people providing the banking will earn a lot of money, but it won't change the infrastructure there and won't become fairer. So I think that, one of the advantages of building in the UK is that it is still seen to be probably the best regulated banking system in the world, and therefore if you can build it in the UK and then you can take it abroad, wherever that be internationally, it's seen as a badge of honor. But I think that in the UK there is always a danger that you could be overbanked unless you're doing it for particular niches.
But I guess it moves into what basically what happens to high street banks. One merges with another, and it will just move in that direction.
And I also think we're choosing what we do with them. I mean, in that, I go back to a lot of people using Monzo. I'm not saying exclusively, use it as a entertainment payment. It's fun because of all the information you get. When you're using it, there'll be others who you can who can use it for travel. A lot of people use a Revolut card or whatever. I mean, from our perspective as SaaScada, we can build anything that a client wants. I think the key is how many clients do you have as a business and how many makes it viable. And I think there's a lot of people who want to be a Monzo with 3 million or whatever the number is, or a Starling with 1 million. But there are very few times where you can create those numbers unless you have a specific value proposition that is a bit different.
In those inquiries that you get, do you see the pattern of waves then? A wave of patterns, sorry, in terms of what people want to offer to the market?
I mean, absolutely. And you'll see people focusing on different segments of the market. And particularly, I would say a lot of work being done with families and creating the family type account where the kids can have control of certain amounts of money and vice versa. But actually doing it through partnerships, with charities, but organizations who, it's financial education. It goes back to the point I think that you raised earlier on. Bringing a card out or a mobile phone app is brilliant, but how do you educate people who have never used it to use it? Well, I'll tell you what we do. We'll put a video on YouTube. I don't really use YouTube that much. Yeah. So whichever way you look at it, and the UK is probably a bit different, but actually, if I look even at the States, or I look at Africa, yeah, there's a role for technology that can really, really get rid of a lot of barriers and create a first-class financial product for millions of people. However, you will still need people who are trusted to educate people to be able to use it properly. Because we've all downloaded an app and go, oh, that's really good. And after about 5, I don't like this, because you can't be bothered to actually learn a little bit more. We've all done it, and press it and then delete.
The question about Africa, because I'm just curious, really, in terms of that education side, is there a desire for the change? Is there a desire to implement these new technology products?
Okay. The simple answer is no, just for financial services. Financial inclusion, ignore. What we mean is putting food on the table when you really get down to it.
Yeah, of course.
So the reality is, and I'm involved as a non-exec director in a consortium called FinCom Eco. Very exciting. But basically, what it does is bring farmers to warehousing to the commodity exchange on one platform. And why is that important? It's important because when a farmer actually, let's start at the beginning, borrows some money initially to buy seeds, inputs, and pesticides, fertilizer, grows a crop, and then invariably what can happen is that when that crop is ready to be harvested, someone with a truck will come down and say, oh, well, we'll take it at 50 cents in the dollar or whatever it is. And he will take that because he's got that money and he can put food on the table. If you can create an infrastructure that the farmer can borrow at a lot less interest rates, so can buy better better seeds, pesticides, fertilizer, then you work with a local cooperative, a local community group, where they will actually at the harvest will help harvest and put it in a truck and get it to warehouse. Then you get a warehouse receipt there and then, and that you can use blockchain. Let's be trendy here. You can use blockchain, so it becomes a definitive. And the farmer at that point has some choices. He can either get the money there and then at a fair price. He can leave some grain in there, take some money, and then when South African breweries or whatever want a load of grain, then he can actually decide to sell at a price, and therefore, and automatically on the system, his debt's paid off, he has money and whatever. And to put that in perspective, the pilot that we ran in Malawi in 2018 gave on average a 35% increase in revenue to the farmer in year one. And that's significant.
Yeah.
Because what that does is a number of things, not just for the farmer. If you do, and it was only with 10,000 farmers as a pilot, but actually if you can do it there, which then creates more money within that community as well.
And 10,000 is not a small number.
No, we did it with that sort of number. But and what that does is start to create some value, some community. But actually, it's a generational thing. It's not going to happen overnight.
No.
So to answer your question, technology is wonderful, but actually it doesn't mean anything unless you can add value. And in that case, it is putting more food on the table, giving them more money to spend in that local area. Therefore, everyone's starting to benefit. But I go back to the point, trusting the infrastructure, which they don't probably have. And in fact, probably where we are with our banking. Yeah.
No, I think there's been a shift from a commercial point, consumer point of view, in terms of the trust. It's like my girlfriend's father always banked with normal banks, and I just got him on Starling the other day, and he was so shocked about how easy it was to literally get it. And he wouldn't believe me. I said, look, it will take you 5 minutes. And actually it took him about 10 minutes because we had to take his ID photo a couple of times, but still, he did it in between coming to our house, sat on the sofa, playing with our dog. And by the time he left, he had a bank account that was all set up and a business bank. And you're just like, look, why people question why, like you said earlier about the high streets dying, people question it.
I was with a good friend of mine back in 2015 when we launched the Change Account initially, and we were in a bar in France, and he ran a high net worth bank actually at the time. And he said, "Oh, you've been playing around with this new bank. Is it all right?" I said, "Yeah, it's doing all right." I said, "Do you want an account?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "What?" And it took him 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And he went, "Are you serious? It would take us 3 days at our place." I went, "What can I do?" You know, that's technology.
That's a really great example there. Do you think he thought, "Oh, it takes 3 days," or did he think, "Bugger, we've got to do some changes"?
Well, no, and that started the process. Absolutely right. And there's a number of what you would call high net worth banks, the traditionals, who are looking at, they've got to change because there are people, not a lot of rich people who've got a lot of money to put into these banks, use technology and don't want to wait 3 days for money to be transferred or whatever.
And the rich are getting younger.
Very, exactly right. Well, they are me because I'm getting older. So they're all younger than me.
That's the way the world works, Steve.
I don't believe it.
I can't sugarcoat this one.
I've got Peter Pan on my Skype. I'm living with that one.
Yeah, you'll be fine then. You'll be fine. But listen, Steve, look, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we could probably chat for hours, me and you. I think you're that sort of guy that will just keep giving me value, and you've got so many stories to share. But I would love for you to just leave us on a couple of points in terms of how businesses can perhaps help create that fairer society that you're looking for.
Okay. Thanks, Dean. I think very simply is to look at the communities you're serving. I think what we've seen in this pandemic is supply chains, actually. And people are, "Oh, I didn't know we were part of this and that." And I think it's actually to look at how we can do that. And I've always said to the financial services industry specifically, a lot of financial services industry suppliers are very small. They need to be paid on time. That's fair. That's just on one point. And that's a very important. The second one is from a purely customer consumer. Use the technology to enable you to make better decisions. Yes, as a financial services industry, but actually you've got to take account of the person itself as well. We do everything now. Know your customer. We do everything remotely. We do it electronically. And if I don't know where you live and whatever, there's still got to be the humanity around it. Or else we won't be supporting the people who actually can add real value to the business, but actually are just slightly outside the norm when it comes to applying for an account.
Be flexible.
Yeah.
It's I think that's the thing, is a lot of people now just think the answer's on a screen, and it's like Little Britain, computer said no. It's like, well,
yeah, no, absolutely, it's exactly that. And the challenge is there that if they do say no, and I have a friend who wanted to set up a business and is using Starling, but he was slightly different because his background was a bit different, and computer said no. And why does the computer say no is usually a question that actually we don't train people to ask. It just says no. What are you and what happens then generally, they send you a load of bump that says, right, you got to provide this, this, and this, rather than saying, actually, the reason it said no is because of this. Right, that's all we need, a bit more information on.
Just clarity.
But that's the challenge for us all in every business.
Yeah, it's I think it's a super interesting time, obviously, for the world, but in business especially, and especially the financial markets, financial services, about how many people are going to be adapting after this. I think people are going to become more used to doing things from their home, from their phone. Perhaps those couple of people that haven't got into that sort of pattern or that behavior have now been forced into that.
Well, even you look at grandparents and even great grandparents now using Zoom, using Skype, using FaceTime, who probably have never used it before because they haven't had to do to that extent.
I don't know why, but whenever they do come on camera, they're always very close to the camera.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's nature of the beast, isn't it?
It always makes me have a little chuckle. But yeah, time's changing, and I think you're in a great position in terms of your business for this change.
We plan to be in a good position anyway. We wouldn't have wanted this on anything, but the key for us as any business is planning for the future, but ensuring that we can actually retain and maintain where we are through this curious time.
Curious time. Great way to put it. Listen, Steve, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, contact you directly, pick your brains, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just email me at steve@SaaScada.com.
Easy. Love it. I love it when it's just so simple. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Stephen.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
And you.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening. This has been Founders 365.